the clink of silverware against china, the low hum of conversations, the soft glow of the chandeliers. It was all supposed to be perfect. I'd spent weeks planning this, our 15th anniversary dinner at La Belle Époque, the kind of place where they remember your name and your favorite wine. 15 years. It felt like a lifetime, and yet like we'd just met yesterday in that dusty college library. I remember seeing Rebecca for the first time. She was all fiery energy and bright laughter, a stark contrast to my quiet, ordered world. I was a numbers guy, an accounting student, already mapping out my life in spreadsheets. She was a whirlwind of creativity, a marketing major with dreams that seemed to stretch beyond the campus green. They said we were an unlikely pair. Even my own mother, Diane, in her usual blunt way, had once remarked, "She's a vibrant thing, Michael. Almost too vibrant for you, maybe. Out of your league, some might say." It stung, but a part of me knew what she meant. Rebecca was a supernova, and I, a steady planet orbiting her glow. Tonight, though, that glow seemed dimmed, or maybe just directed elsewhere. She kept glancing at her phone, tucked beside her bread plate. A small frown creased her forehead each time she picked it up, her thumb scrolling quickly. "Everything okay, Bex?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. She offered a quick, tight smile. "Oh, yeah, fine. Just work stuff. You know how it is." I did know. Her career as a marketing executive was demanding, full of deadlines and demanding clients. But tonight, on our anniversary, the sommelier arrived with the dessert wine, a rich golden sauterne I'd pre-selected. As he poured, her phone buzzed again, a more insistent, prolonged vibration. This time she didn't just glance. She picked it up, a flicker of something, annoyance? Urgency? In her eyes. "So sorry, Michael," she said, already halfway out of her seat. "I really have to take this. It's important." She hurried towards the restaurant's ornate entrance, disappearing onto the rain-slicked sidewalk outside. Through the large glass window, I watched her. Her back was to me, but her body language was unmistakable. She was animated, one hand gesturing as she spoke, her head nodding. Even from this distance, I could see the shift in her posture, a certain lightness, an engagement that hadn't been there during our conversation about, well, what had we been talking about? It all felt like a blur now. There was an intimacy to her stance, the way she tilted her head, the slight smile I could just make out in her reflection on the dark window. It wasn't the body language of a stressed executive dealing with a work crisis. When she returned, her cheeks were flushed, her eyes a little too bright. "Sorry about that," she said, sliding back into her chair. "Just a client thing, you know." "Everything all right?" I pressed gently. Yes, all sorted." She took a large gulp of water, avoiding my gaze. The dessert arrived, a decadent chocolate lava cake we usually savored, but tonight it sat between us, a sweet, untouched symbol of the growing chasm. The rest of the evening was a study in forced pleasantries. The tension was a palpable thing, thick and cloying like the expensive perfume of the woman at the next table. We talked, but the words felt hollow, skirting around the unspoken. Later, in the quiet of our bedroom, I lay awake, the numbers on the alarm clock glowing a mocking red. 2:17 a.m. Rebecca slept beside me, or pretended to, her breathing too even, too controlled. I replayed the scene at the restaurant over and over in my mind. Her hurried exit, the animated conversation, the flustered return. "Work," she'd said. But my gut, that usually reliable, methodical part of me, screamed otherwise. It was a discordant note in the symphony of our 15-year marriage, and I couldn't ignore it. Stability, the bedrock of my existence, the very thing I'd craved since my parents' messy divorce, suddenly felt like shifting sand. The alarm blared at 6:30 a.m., same as every weekday. The routine was a comfort, a predictable sequence in a world that suddenly felt off. Coffee brewing, the smell of toast, the rustle of the newspaper. But as I went through the motions, I found myself watching Rebecca. Not openly, not in a way that would alert her, but sidelong glances, observations from the corner of my eye. She was at the kitchen island, scrolling through her phone again, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips as she texted. She thought I wasn't looking. I pretended to be absorbed in the financial pages, but my focus was entirely on her. The smile wasn't for me. It hadn't been for me in a long time, if I was honest with myself. My mother's words echoed in my mind again. Out of his league. Had I been a fool to think I could hold on to someone like Rebecca? Someone so bright? So ambitious? Had the stability I offered, the quiet predictability of our life, become a cage for her? Work was a nightmare. The columns of figures on my spreadsheets blurred, the usual precision of my thoughts muddled by a rising tide of anxiety. During my lunch break, instead of reviewing quarterly reports, I found myself typing "signs your spouse is cheating" into the search bar. The articles bloomed on my screen, a checklist of my own burgeoning fears: secrecy, increased phone use, emotional distance, defensiveness. Check, 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 check. Just as I was about to click on a particularly lurid link titled, "Is she hiding a second life?" James Miller, my best friend since college, and now a partner at a downtown law firm, rapped on my office door. "Got time for a starving lawyer?" he asked, already striding in, his briefcase thumping onto the visitor's chair. James was all sharp angles and sharper wit, a man who didn't believe in sugarcoating. If I was drowning, he wouldn't throw me a life raft. He'd yell instructions on how to swim. "Hey, James, sure." I minimized the browser window, a flush creeping up my neck. He eyed me, his gaze unnervingly perceptive. "You look like hell, Mike. Rough night?" "Something like that. Anniversary dinner," I mumbled. "Ah, 15 years, right? Congrats, or not congrats? You look like you lost a fight with a tax code." I tried to laugh it off. "Just tired. You know Rebecca. Ambitious, always working." "Yeah, Rebecca's a go-getter," James agreed, pulling a sandwich from his briefcase. "So what's really on your mind? You've got that look. The one you get when you're about to reorganize your entire filing system by color, then by date, then by existential dread." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to pour it all out, the suspicions, the fear, the image of Rebecca on the phone. But another part, the loyal, hopeful part, recoiled. Voicing it would make it too real. "Just a hypothetical," I began, picking at a loose thread on my chair. "Say a guy, a friend, thinks his wife might be unhappy, or, seeking happiness elsewhere." James paused, his sandwich halfway to his mouth. "Hypothetically?" "Hypothetically." "And this hypothetical friend, is he looking for marriage advice or legal advice?" "Just options. What are the first steps, hypothetically, if things were to go south?" The words tasted like ash in my mouth. James put his sandwich down. His usual jovial expression was replaced by a more serious, lawyerly mien. "Okay, Michael. Hypothetically, first step is always to know where you stand. Get facts, not just feelings, but also don't go playing amateur spy and doing something stupid that could backfire. If your friend is seriously considering options, he needs to talk to someone, professionally." He tapped his chest. "Someone like me, but only when he's got more than a bad feeling." He leaned forward. "Look, Mike, I'm not going to tell you what to think, but don't jump to conclusions. 15 years is a long time. People get distracted. They have work pressures. Talk to her. Properly talk to her. Before you start mentally dividing assets." He paused. "But just in case, I'll email you a checklist. Standard stuff, things to be aware of. For your friend, of course." The rest of the day, James's just-in-case advice echoed in my head, a grim counterpoint to the reassurances I tried to give myself. Talk to her. He was right, but how could I, when the words themselves felt like a betrayal of the life we'd built? That night, sleep eluded me again. Every time Rebecca shifted beside me, I tensed, wondering. The days that followed were a blur of feigned normalcy and covert observation. I became a student of Rebecca's habits, a detective in my own home. Her phone, once a casual accessory, was now an extension of her hand, always angled away from me, messages and calls quickly dismissed if I entered the room. Her work hours, already long, stretched later into the evenings. "Client dinners," she'd say vaguely. "Networking events." The explanations were always plausible, yet delivered with a new, subtle defensiveness. The old me, the trusting Michael, would have accepted her words at face value. Rebecca was ambitious. Her career demanded these things. But the new Michael, the one gnawed by suspicion, saw deceit in every late night, every vague answer. My first concrete step into the murky waters of investigation was checking our online phone bill. My heart hammered against my ribs as I logged in, a password we'd shared for years suddenly feeling like a skeleton key to a forbidden room. There it was, a recurring number called multiple times a day, every day, for the past few weeks. Not a work number I recognized. Short calls, long calls, calls late at night. Each entry was another small stab of confirmation. The need to know, to see, became an obsession. So, one rainy Tuesday evening, when Rebecca announced another client dinner at a downtown hotel, I decided to follow her. It felt sordid beneath me, like something out of a cheap detective novel. But the gnawing uncertainty was worse. I told her I was meeting James for a drink, a lie that slipped out with surprising ease. I parked my car across the street from the Argent, an upscale hotel with a swanky lobby bar, the kind of place deals were made and secrets were kept. The rain was relentless, blurring my windshield, each swipe of the wipers revealing the scene in staccato flashes. And then I saw her, emerging from a sleek black sedan, laughing, her head tilted back, the way she used to laugh with me. Beside her, holding an umbrella, was a man. Tall, well-dressed, with an easy confidence that radiated even from across the street. He put a hand on the small of her back as they walked towards the hotel entrance, a casual, possessive gesture that made my stomach clench. Nathan Winters. I didn't know his name then, but his face, handsome and smiling down at my wife, was seared into my memory. They settled into a secluded booth in the bar, visible through the large front window. They leaned in close, their conversation animated, their body language intimate. He touched her arm. She laughed, her eyes sparkling. They looked comfortable, happy, like two people who shared a world I wasn't a part of. My hands trembled as I raised my phone, the lens zooming in on their smiling faces. Click, click, click. Each photo was a piece of evidence, a nail in the coffin of my denial. I felt sick, a cold wave of betrayal washing over me. This wasn't a client, this wasn't work, this was something else, something that threatened to shatter the carefully constructed world I had called my life. The man from the bar. His image was burned into my brain. The way he looked at Rebecca. The easy familiarity between them. It fueled a cold, hard rage I hadn't known I possessed. My methodical nature, usually applied to balance sheets and tax codes, now channeled itself into a singular, obsessive purpose: gathering evidence. Our shared email account was the next logical step. We'd always had an open-door policy with our digital lives, a testament, I'd once believed, to our mutual trust. Now, that openness felt like a vulnerability she'd exploited. I scrolled through months of her inbox, my heart pounding with a mixture of dread and grim determination. But there was nothing. No clandestine messages, no suggestive exchanges, just work emails, newsletters, online shopping confirmations. It was too clean. Either she was incredibly careful, or I was barking up the wrong tree. My gut insisted on the former. Then, while tidying up our bedroom, a euphemism for searching, I found it. Tucked into a side pocket of her designer handbag, the one she'd taken on her marketing conference weekend a month prior, was a receipt. Not for a conference center, but for the Serafina, one of the most expensive boutique hotels in the city, a place known for discreet getaways, a 2-night stay, for 1 room. My blood ran cold. The conference had been an elaborate lie. Armed with the image from the hotel bar, I turned to Google. Man with Rebecca Cooper marketing executive. Nothing. Then, a different approach. I uploaded the clearest photo I'd taken, the one where his face was almost in profile, into a reverse image search. Bingo. Nathan Winters, CEO of Innovatech Solutions, a rising star in the tech world. Charismatic, successful, and, as a quick cross-reference revealed, an alumnus of our college. They'd been contemporaries. The pieces began to click into place, forming a sickening mosaic. The late nights, the vague excuses, the secretive calls, the hotel receipt, Nathan Winters. I started a timeline, a meticulous spreadsheet detailing every suspicious incident, every lie, every discrepancy in her stories. Dates, times, locations. It was the accountant in me, seeking order in the chaos of my emotions. But photos from a distance and a hotel receipt weren't enough. They were circumstantial. I needed something undeniable, something that would leave no room for excuses or gaslighting. The thought of hiring a private investigator had once seemed like the domain of paranoid spouses in bad movies. Now it felt like a grim necessity. I wanted concrete evidence, irrefutable proof of her betrayal. The part of me that still clung to the hope of a misunderstanding was shrinking with every new discovery. The private investigator, a gruff, no-nonsense man named Henderson, was in recommendation from a discreet contact of James, strictly for due diligence on a business associate, of course. Handing over Rebecca's photo and schedule felt like a new level of betrayal. But my resolve was hardening. I needed to know the truth, no matter how painful. For a week, Henderson and his team tailed Rebecca. The updates came daily, sterile reports accompanied by grainy photographs. Rebecca and Nathan meeting for lunch at a chic bistro. Rebecca and Nathan walking into an office building, emerging hours later, deep in conversation. Rebecca and Nathan having coffee, their heads bent close together. Public places always. Nothing overtly scandalous. They looked like business associates. But there was an undeniable chemistry, a spark in their interactions that even the PI's dispassionate lens couldn't entirely erase. "They appear professional, Mr. Cooper," Henderson reported in his gravelly voice. "But there's a rapport." Then came the bombshell. Not from Henderson, but from my own increasingly frantic digging. I'd started looking into our finances more closely, beyond the joint accounts. And there it was, a separate bank account under Rebecca's name, one I had no knowledge of. It had been opened 6 months ago, and there were significant deposits, large irregular sums. From where? For what? My mind reeled. Was this a slush fund for her affair? A getaway account? The paranoia was a tightening knot in my chest. Had our entire marriage been a sham? Was I the stable, predictable fool she'd settled for while planning her escape? I had to talk to someone who might have seen this coming. My mother. Diane Cooper was a woman of few words, but those words usually cut straight to the bone. I found her in her garden, pruning roses with a fierce precision. "Mom," I started, the word catching in my throat. "Remember what you said about Rebecca? About her being out of my league?" She snipped a wilting rose, not looking at me. "I remember." Did you ever not trust her?" She finally turned, her eyes, so like my own, filled with a weary understanding. "Michael, a mother sees things. Rebecca, she's always been ambitious. Restless, almost. I saw the way she looked at you, yes, with affection. But there was always a part of her, I felt, that was looking beyond. I kept quiet because you were happy. Or so I thought. A mother doesn't want to burst her son's bubble, even if she suspects it's a fragile one." Her words, meant to comfort, only twisted the knife. You were happy, or so I thought. Had I been blind, willfully ignorant? The carefully curated image of my perfect marriage was crumbling around me, revealing a rotten core. The evidence was all there, laid out on our dining room table like a macabre feast. Henderson's photos, the hotel receipt, printouts of the phone bill, the statements from the secret bank account, the damning timeline. Each piece a testament to my wife's duplicity. My methodical mind had constructed an airtight case. Now, for the verdict. I'd arranged to be home early, feigning a sudden illness. Rebecca was due back from a strategy meeting, a meeting I now knew, with sickening certainty, involved Nathan Winters. The PI had confirmed their lunch, followed by an afternoon at Nathan's office. The key turned in the lock. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of anger and pain. Rebecca walked in, laughing at something someone was saying, and then he walked in behind her. Nathan Winters, in my house. They both stopped dead when they saw me, their smiles vanishing, replaced by identical expressions of shock. "Michael!" Rebecca exclaimed, her voice a pitch higher than usual. "What are you doing home? Are you okay?" Before she could spin another lie, I gestured towards the table. "I think the question is, what are you doing, Rebecca? And who the hell is this?" My voice was dangerously calm, a chilling contrast to the inferno raging inside me. "Michael, this is Nathan Winters, a business colleague," Rebecca stammered, her eyes darting between me and the damning display on the table. "A business colleague?" I scoffed, the sound harsh in the sudden silence. "Is that what you call the man you take to expensive hotels on marketing conferences? The man you have secret bank accounts with? The man you're clearly having an affair with?" The accusations hung in the air, heavy and ugly. Rebecca's face went pale. "Affair? Michael, what are you talking about? How could you? Did you follow me? Did you spy on me?" Her voice rose, a mixture of disbelief and outrage. Nathan stepped forward, his expression surprisingly calm. "Mr. Cooper, Michael, there's a misunderstanding here. Rebecca and I are not." "Get out!" I snarled, turning on him. "Get out of my house, now!" My control was slipping, the carefully constructed dam of my composure about to burst. "Michael, please, just listen," Rebecca pleaded, reaching for my arm. I jerked away. "Listen to what? More lies? I've seen the evidence, Rebecca, the calls, the meetings, the money. How stupid do you think I am?" The argument exploded then, a torrent of accusations and denials, hurt and anger. Her shock at my surveillance, my fury at her betrayal. Words were thrown like weapons, each one designed to wound. "I can't believe you'd think this of me," she cried, tears streaming down her face. "After 15 years... 15 years of what, Rebecca?" I shot back, my voice cracking. 15 years of me being a fool? The dam broke. I want a divorce, I heard myself say, the words echoing in the suddenly silent room. The finality of them stunned even me. Rebecca stared at me, her face a mask of devastation. Nathan looked on, helpless. Without another word, I picked up my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial. "James," I said when he answered, my voice hoarse. "It's Michael. Start the proceedings. I want a divorce." Rebecca let out a sob, a broken, wounded sound. She turned and fled the room. A few minutes later, I heard the front door slam. She was gone. To a friend's, she'd later text. Devastated. I sank into a chair, the evidence of her betrayal mocking me from the table. My perfect marriage, my stable life, all shattered. And I, Michael Cooper, the man who valued stability above all, had just set the demolition charges myself. The lawyer's office was cold, sterile, reflecting the state of my emotions. James sat across his mahogany desk, his expression a mixture of professional concern and friendly sympathy. He'd already drawn up the initial separation agreement, fast, efficient, just like I'd asked. "Michael, are you sure you want to move this quickly?" James asked, his pen hovering over the documents. "An uncontested divorce based on irreconcilable differences is the quickest route, but this feels rushed. Maybe you two should take a breath, talk to a counselor." "There's nothing to talk about, James," I said, my voice flat. "She had an affair. She lied. End of story." The words sounded hollow, even to me. The initial rage was starting to give way to a vast, empty ache. Okay. James sighed, rubbing his temples. "But let's be strategic. Don't make any rash decisions out of anger. We need to protect your assets, ensure a fair division." His words droned on. Alimony, property, investments. It all felt surreal, like he was talking about someone else's life. My life, the one I'd meticulously built with Rebecca, was now being itemized, valued, prepared for dismantling. Later that day, my phone rang. An unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Michael Cooper?" a smooth, confident voice asked. "Yes." "It's Nathan Winters, Rebecca's colleague." I stiffened. "I have nothing to say to you." "I understand you're angry," Nathan said, his tone surprisingly reasonable. "But I think you need to hear the truth. Rebecca is devastated, and you've got this completely wrong. Can we meet, just for a few minutes? I can explain." My first instinct was to hang up. James's advice echoed in my ears. Don't do anything stupid. Talking to this man, the man who had destroyed my marriage, felt profoundly stupid, but a sliver of something, curiosity, a desperate, fading hope that there was more to this, made me pause. "Why should I believe anything you say?" I asked, my voice laced with suspicion. "Because Rebecca deserves for you to know the truth, even if you don't want to hear it from me. And frankly, because my reputation is also being dragged through the mud here. Please, Michael, coffee? My treat." Against my better judgment, against James's explicit warnings still ringing in my ears, I agreed. Maybe it was a masochistic urge to confront the source of my pain, to hear the lies firsthand. Or maybe, just maybe, it was that tiny, stubborn ember of hope refusing to be extinguished. We met at a neutral, anonymous coffee shop, halfway between my office and his. He was already there, looking out of place in his expensive suit amidst the students and freelancers. He looked tired, stressed. Good, I thought, with a vindictive satisfaction. "Thank you for coming," he said, as I sat down opposite him. "I'm not here for pleasantries, Winters," I said, my voice hard. "You have 5 minutes." He took a deep breath. "Michael, Rebecca and I are not having an affair. We never have been." I snorted. "Right. And the photos? The hotel? The secret bank account? Are all related to a business venture, Nathan said, meeting my gaze directly. A new marketing agency Rebecca has been building. She wanted to surprise you with it. She poured her heart and soul into it for the past year. I stared at him, dumbfounded. A business venture? It sounded too convenient, too neat a package to explain away the mountain of evidence I'd amassed. She wanted to prove to herself, and to you, that she could build something on her own, from the ground up, Nathan continued. The late nights, the meetings, it was all for the business. The marketing conferences was a weekend she spent holed up in that hotel, finalizing her business plan and securing her first major investor. I was there for part of it, yes, as a mentor, an advisor. We're old college friends, Michael. We reconnected at an alumni event last year. She told me about her idea, and I thought it was brilliant. I've been helping her get it off the ground. He paused, letting his words sink in. The separate bank account? That's her startup capital. Investor money, some of her own savings. She didn't want to risk your joint finances until she knew it was viable. I was reeling. Skepticism warred with a dawning, horrifying possibility. Had I made a catastrophic mistake? But the way you two were, so comfortable, I stammered, the images from the hotel bar replaying in my mind. Nathan sighed. We're friends, Michael. And yes, we dated briefly in college, a lifetime ago. It didn't end well back then, but we're adults now. There's a rapport, a shared history, but it's purely platonic. My wife knows all about our business dealings. In fact, Sophia encouraged me to help Rebecca. His explanation was straightforward, detailed, delivered without a hint of evasion. He answered every question, every accusation, with a patient calm that chipped away at my certainty. By the time he finished, my anger had been replaced by a sickening wave of confusion and a dawning, terrible shame. What if he was telling the truth? Nathan's words echoed in my head, a relentless loop of business venture, surprise, purely platonic. I wanted to dismiss it, to cling to my narrative of betrayal. It was easier than confronting the alternative. That I, Michael Cooper, the methodical, rational accountant, had allowed my insecurities to spin out of control, to destroy the very thing I cherished most. Doubt, a corrosive acid, began to eat away at my convictions, but Rebecca had still lied. She'd been secretive. Even if it wasn't an affair, it was a betrayal of trust, wasn't it? I needed more. I needed corroboration. My next call was to Sophia Winters, Nathan's wife. I found her number through a quick online search for her pediatric practice. She sounded surprised to hear from me, but agreed to meet. Sophia was the antithesis of her charismatic husband. Quiet, thoughtful, with kind, intelligent eyes. We met at a park, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows. Michael, she said, her voice gentle but firm. Nathan told me about your conversation. And yes, everything he said is true. He and Rebecca are working on a business together. I've been aware of it from the start. But they dated in college, I said, the words sounding more like an accusation than a question. Sophia nodded. They did. It was intense from what Nathan's told me, but it ended badly. He wasn't ready for the kind of commitment Rebecca wanted back then. He broke her heart, actually. When they reconnected last year, it was awkward at first. But they found a way to be professionals. Friends, even. I trust my husband, Michael. And frankly, I admire Rebecca's ambition. Her words were another blow to my carefully constructed case. If Nathan's wife wasn't worried, why had I been so consumed by jealousy? My next reluctant call was to Chloe, Rebecca's best friend. Chloe had always been more Rebecca's confidant than mine, but we'd always been friendly. She was hesitant at first, torn by loyalty. Michael, I don't want to get in the middle of this, she said, her voice tight. Chloe, please, I need to understand. Was Rebecca... Is she having an affair with Nathan Winters? A long pause. Then a sigh. No, Michael, absolutely not. An affair? That's not Rebecca, but has she been unhappy? Yes. For a while now, she felt stuck, unseen, like you didn't really get her anymore. Unseen. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. While I was busy looking for a lover in the shadows, I'd failed to see the woman standing right in front of me. The pieces were reassembling themselves now, forming a different, more complex picture. A picture in which I was not the sole victim, but perhaps an unwitting antagonist. Later that evening, back in the suffocating silence of our empty house, I found it. Rebecca's journal. It was on her bedside table, partially hidden beneath a stack of books. She must have forgotten it in her haste to leave. For a moment I hesitated. Reading someone's private thoughts was a violation, a line I knew I shouldn't cross. But I was desperate, adrift in a sea of uncertainty. Against my better judgment, my hand reached out. The journal was a simple, leather-bound book, its pages filled with Rebecca's elegant, flowing script. With trembling hands, I opened it, feeling like an intruder, a trespasser in the most private corners of her mind. October 12th. 15 years. Sometimes it feels like a dream, sometimes like a beautifully crafted cage. Michael is a good man, kind, stable, predictable. He loves me, I know he does. But does he see me? The real me? Or just the version of me that fits neatly into his ordered world? The words were a gut punch. A beautifully crafted cage. Is that how she saw our life? Our marriage? November 5th. Had coffee with Nathan today. It's strange seeing him again after all these years. He's still got that spark, that infectious energy. He actually listened when I talked about my idea. Really listened. Didn't just pat me on the head and tell me it was a nice little hobby. He sees the potential. It felt exhilarating. So Nathan had been the catalyst, not for an affair, but for a reawakening of her ambition, an ambition I had, perhaps, unknowingly stifled. December 18th. The business plan is coming together. It's terrifying and thrilling all at once. I want to tell Michael, I really do. But I'm scared. Scared he'll dismiss it. Tell me it's too risky, that we should stick to what we know. He values stability so much. Sometimes I feel like my dreams are a threat to his peace of mind. I need to prove this can work. Prove it to myself, before I can face his skepticism. Her fear of my reaction. It was a bitter pill to swallow. Had I become so risk-averse, so focused on security that I'd made her feel she couldn't share her dreams with me? The memory of past conversations surfaced, her tentative suggestions for new ventures, new ideas, met with my cautious, pragmatic responses. Are you sure that's wise, Bex? Is it really worth the risk? January 22nd. Major breakthrough today. Nathan called during our anniversary dinner. Terrible timing, I know, but he had news about the lead investor. They're in. I could barely contain myself. Had to pretend it was a work crisis. Michael looked so disappointed. I felt awful, but I couldn't tell him. Not yet. This has to be my success, on my own terms. Then he'll see. Then he'll understand. The phone call. The call that had started it all. It hadn't been a lover. It had been an investor. The animated conversation, the flushed cheeks. It was the thrill of her dream coming to life. And I, in my blind suspicion, had twisted it into a narrative of betrayal. Page after page, the journal painted a portrait of a woman I barely recognized. A woman grappling with her own ambitions, her fears, her frustrations. A woman who felt increasingly invisible in her own marriage. She wrote about my complacency, how I'd stopped seeing her as an individual, how the routines we'd once cherished had become ruts. She wasn't seeking another man. She was seeking herself. The weight of my misjudgment pressed down on me, crushing me. I had been so convinced of her infidelity, so focused on gathering evidence of a phantom affair, that I had missed the real story. The story of a woman trying to find her own voice, her own path, within the confines of a marriage that had, for her, become too small. I closed the journal, the leather cool beneath my trembling fingers. The evidence I had so meticulously gathered, the photos, the receipts, the timelines, now seemed like artifacts from a delusional reality I had constructed. The real evidence, the truth of our unraveling marriage, lay within these pages, in Rebecca's silent, eloquent confessions. And in that truth, I saw my own reflection, a husband who, in his quest for stability, had inadvertently clipped his wife's wings. The betrayal, I realized with a sickening lurch, was not solely hers. The silence of the small, furnished apartment I'd rented was a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. It was a sterile space, devoid of history, devoid of Rebecca. A fitting purgatory for my self-inflicted exile. I needed this space, this distance, to process the wreckage of my assumptions. My childhood played on a loop in my mind. My parents' bitter divorce, the accusations of infidelity, the constant tension that had filled our home, my father's heartbroken rage, my mother's defensive justifications. I'd sworn my own marriage would be different. I'd built walls of stability, of routine, believing they would keep out the chaos. But I'd inadvertently created a fortress so impenetrable that even Rebecca's dreams couldn't find a way in or out. I realized with a chilling clarity that I'd been waiting for Rebecca to betray me. Subconsciously, I'd been projecting my mother's actions onto my wife, anticipating the inevitable rerun of my parents' drama. Every late night, every distracted moment, I'd interpreted through the warped lens of my own past trauma. James, to his credit, listened without judgment as I haltingly confessed my discoveries, my misinterpretations, the profound depth of my screw-up. "We all carry baggage, Mike," he said, his usual bluntness softened by a rare display of empathy. "The trick is not to let it unpack itself in someone else's living room." His words, though laced with his characteristic dry wit, hit home. My fear of abandonment, my need for control, these were the ghosts that had haunted my marriage, not some imaginary lover. Therapy. The word had always seemed like something for other people, people with real problems. But looking at the shambles of my life, I couldn't deny it any longer. I needed help. My first session was excruciating, voicing my insecurities, my control issues, my deep-seated fear of history repeating itself felt like pulling teeth. But slowly, painstakingly, I began to understand. My controlling behaviors, the need for order, for predictability, for Rebecca to fit into the neat box I'd constructed for our life, hadn't been about love, not entirely. They'd been about fear, and in trying to control everything, I'd pushed Rebecca away, making her feel small, unseen. I made a list, a painful, self-indicting list of all the ways I'd failed to support Rebecca. The times I'd subtly dismissed her ideas, prioritized my need for security over her desire for growth, failed to celebrate her ambitions. The perfect marriage I thought we had? It had been perfect for me. For Rebecca, it had become a gilded cage, as her journal so painfully described. I hadn't just misunderstood a few phone calls. I'd misunderstood the woman I'd been married to for 15 years. Weeks passed. Weeks filled with therapy sessions, solitary meals, and endless replays of my own failings. The anger had long since dissipated, replaced by a profound, aching regret. I had to talk to Rebecca. Not to excuse my actions, but to own them, to apologize. I typed out a text message a dozen times, each version more stilted and inadequate than the last. Finally, I just wrote, "Rebecca, can we talk? Please, no accusations, just talk. Michael, She replied a few hours later. Coffee. Tomorrow. 10 a.m. The usual place? The usual place was a small cafe near our old apartment, a place filled with memories of happier times, weekend brunches, lazy afternoons. It felt like a lifetime ago. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a small table by the window, nursing a latte. She looked tired, thinner, but there was a new resolve in her eyes, a guarded strength I hadn't seen before. The apology spilled out of me, raw and unfiltered. I told her about the journal, about my therapy, about the painful realizations of how my fears and insecurities had poisoned our marriage. I apologized for the spying, for the accusations, for the private investigator, for the horrible scene at the house, for not trusting her, for not seeing her. She listened silently, her expression unreadable. When I finally ran out of words, a long silence hung between us. I appreciate the apology, Michael, she said finally, her voice quiet but steady. It means something. But the things you did, they hurt. Deeply. To know you suspected me of that. That you went to such lengths. Then, she began to talk about her business. Phoenix Marketing, she called it. A marketing agency focused on empowering female entrepreneurs. Her voice, hesitant at first, gained strength and passion as she described her clients, her vision, her successes. It was a side of her I'd only glimpsed, a fire I'd nearly extinguished with my own anxieties. Why didn't you tell me, Bex? I asked, the question a soft plea. Why the secrecy? She looked down at her hands. Because I was afraid you wouldn't understand. You've always been so cautious. Every time I brought up a new idea, something that felt exciting to me, you'd find a dozen reasons why it wouldn't work, why it was too risky. I needed to do this for myself, to prove to myself I could. And yes, maybe to prove it to you too. We talked for over an hour, the conversation painful, honest, stripped bare of pretense. We both acknowledged the communication failures, the years of unspoken resentments and unmet needs. Finally, I asked the question that had been hovering in the air, the one I both dreaded and needed to ask. Do you still want the divorce? Rebecca looked out the window, her gaze distant. I don't know, Michael, she said softly. I honestly don't know. What you did, it shattered something. I need time. Time to think about whether we can ever get back what we lost. Or if we even should. I gave Rebecca the space she needed. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, resisting the urge to call, to text, to try and fix what I had so spectacularly broken. Instead, I focused on myself, on therapy, on understanding the man I had become and the husband I had been. I met with Nathan Winters again, this time not as an accuser, but as someone seeking understanding. He was gracious, surprisingly so. We had coffee, and he talked more about his history with Rebecca, their brief college romance. She was amazing, even back then, he said. Ambitious, driven. I was a kid, not ready for the kind of future she was already mapping out. I ended it, badly. I was the one who wasn't ready for commitment, Michael, not her. He smiled, a hint of wistfulness in his eyes. She was always the more stable one, in that sense. I was the flight risk. The irony wasn't lost on me. Nathan Winters, the man I'd cast as the homewrecker, had never been a threat to my marriage. The only threat had been my own insecurities. I even met Sophia again, briefly. She wished us well, a quiet sincerity in her voice. They were good people, Nathan and Sophia. People I had wronged with my baseless suspicions. A few weeks later, Rebecca called. Can I come over to your apartment? She asked. We need to talk more. My heart leapt. Hope, fragile but persistent, fluttered in my chest. She arrived looking different, stronger, more centered. She'd been in therapy too, she told me, working through her own feelings, her own part in our communication breakdown. "I'm still hurt, Michael," she said, her gaze direct. "What you did will always be a scar. But I also recognize that I wasn't honest with you. I shut you out. I made assumptions, too. I assumed you wouldn't support me, so I didn't even give you the chance. We talked for hours that evening. Not about the past, but about the future. Could there be a future for us? Could we rebuild from the ashes of my suspicion and her secrecy? If we do this," she said, her voice laced with caution, "it can't be the old marriage. That's gone. We've both changed too much." "I don't want the old marriage," I said, and I meant it. "I want something new, something real." She told me about a new opportunity for Phoenix marketing, a chance to partner with an international firm. It would mean more travel, more time away. The old Michael would have balked, would have seen it as a threat. The new Michael, the one still very much under construction, saw it as a chance for her to soar. "That's amazing, Bex," I said, and the support in my voice was genuine. "We need help," she said finally. "Professional help, if we're even going to consider not divorcing." Marriage counseling. It was a daunting prospect, but also a lifeline. "Yes," I agreed immediately. "Whatever it takes." The next day I called James. "About those divorce papers," I began. "You're not going through with it?" he asked, a hint of relief in his voice. "We're going to try counseling first," I said. "So, about that retainer fee?" James laughed. "Keep it, Mike. Consider it an investment in my sanity. I hate seeing my friends make colossal mistakes, even if it's good for business." Our first couples therapy session was like walking into a minefield, blindfolded. Dr. Evans, a calm, gray-haired woman with perceptive eyes, let us stumble through our narratives, our hurt, our anger. Michael, the controller, learning his need for security, had become a chokehold. Rebecca, the ambitious spirit, learning her fear of being stifled, had led to a damaging secrecy. Individual sessions continued alongside. I delved deeper into my abandonment issues, the long shadow of my parents' divorce. I began to understand how my fear of history repeating itself had made me a hyper-vigilant, suspicious husband, always scanning the horizon for a storm, even when the skies were clear. Rebecca, in her sessions, confronted her own patterns, her tendency to withdraw rather than confront, her fear of her ambitions being dismissed, leading her to hide parts of herself. Slowly, painfully, we started to learn new ways to talk to each other. To listen. Really listen. Not just to the words, but to the emotions, the fears, the unspoken needs beneath them. We learned about "I feel" statements, about active listening, about validating each other's feelings even when we didn't agree. It felt like learning a foreign language, clunky and awkward at first, but gradually becoming more fluent. One Saturday, Rebecca asked me to visit her new office. Phoenix Marketing was housed in a bright, airy loft space downtown, buzzing with a vibrant, predominantly female energy. It was a world away from my quiet, ordered accounting firm. As she walked me through, explaining her projects, her vision, her eyes sparkled with a passion I hadn't seen in years. This was the Rebecca I'd first fallen in love with. The creative force, the dreamer. And for the first time, I wasn't threatened by it. I was in awe. I saw her, truly saw her, perhaps for the first time in a long, long time, not just as my wife, but as this incredible, dynamic individual. We started to establish new boundaries, new expectations. Date nights, non-negotiable. Weekly check-ins, honest and open. No more secrets, no more assumptions. Small moments of connection began to weave a fragile tapestry of new trust. A shared laugh over a burnt dinner. A knowing glance across a crowded room. Holding hands during a difficult therapy session. each one a tiny stitch, repairing the tears in our relationship. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, moments when old patterns threatened to resurface. But we kept trying. We kept talking. We kept showing up. Months passed, a season of therapy, of difficult conversations, of tentative steps towards each other. Rebecca's business was thriving. Phoenix Marketing was making a name for itself. And with my newfound, genuine support, she was more confident, more radiant than I'd seen her in years. I, in turn, was slowly shedding my old skin of control and insecurity. Therapy was chipping away at the fear, replacing it with a quiet, hard-won self-awareness. The question of divorce still hung in the air, unspoken, but present. Dr. Evans had been clear. Counseling wasn't about forcing a reconciliation. It was about helping us make the healthiest decision, whatever that might be. One evening, sitting on the worn sofa in my little apartment, a place that had once symbolized our separation but now felt more like a neutral ground for rebuilding, Rebecca brought it up. "So," she said, her voice soft, "where do we go from here, Michael?" We talked for hours that night, not about the past, but about what a new version of our marriage could look like. We were different people now. The old marriage, the one built on complacency and unspoken resentments, was dead. If we were to continue, it had to be something new, something built on a foundation of honesty, mutual respect, and a willingness to embrace each other's individual growth. "I've been offered that partnership with the international firm," Rebecca said, watching me carefully. "It would mean a lot more travel, for extended periods sometimes." The old Michael would have seen this as a threat, another step away from him. The new Michael, the one still learning, took her hand. "That's incredible, Bex. You should do it. We'll make it work." And I meant it. Her success wasn't a threat to our stability. It was a part of her, and I loved all of her. A slow smile spread across her face. The first truly unguarded smile I'd seen from her in what felt like an eternity. "You mean that?" "I do." We agreed then to renew our commitment, not with a grand gesture, but with a quiet understanding. A choice made not out of obligation or fear, but out of a new, more mature love. A love that had been tested by fire, and somehow had not only survived, but had been forged into something stronger, more resilient. A year to the day after the call, we found ourselves back at La Belle Époque. The same table, even. It was Rebecca's idea, a bold move I wouldn't have expected. "Facing the ghosts," she'd called it, with a wry smile. The restaurant felt different tonight. Or maybe we were different. The lighting seemed softer, the hum of conversation less intrusive. We talked easily, openly, the ghosts of last year's disastrous dinner acknowledged but not allowed to dominate. We reflected on the painful, transformative journey of the past 12 months. The near implosion of our marriage, the raw honesty of therapy, the slow, painstaking process of rebuilding. As dessert arrived, the same chocolate lava cake, but this time we shared it with genuine pleasure. Rebecca's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it. "It's Nathan," she said, meeting my eyes. There was no hesitation, no apology in her voice. "Take it," I said, and I meant it. She smiled, a genuine, open smile, and answered. "Hey, Nathan. Yes, the quarterly reports look great. No, now's fine. Michael understands." She winked at me. Her conversation was brief, professional, punctuated by laughter. When she hung up, she turned back to me, her eyes shining. "He says hello, and that Phoenix Marketing just landed its biggest client yet." "That's fantastic, Bex." I raised my wine glass. "To Phoenix Marketing, and to its brilliant CEO." She touched her glass to mine. "And to its most supportive, if initially misguided, silent partner." I grinned. Actually, about that silent partner bit. I've been talking to James. Not about divorce papers this time, thankfully. We've been drawing up the legal framework for me to officially invest in your company. A significant investment. If you'll have me, that is. Rebecca's eyes widened, then filled with tears. This time, they were tears of joy. Michael, are you serious? Never more serious in my life, I said. I believe in you, Rebecca. I believe in Phoenix, and I want to be a real partner to you in every sense of the word. She reached across the table and took my hand, her grip firm, her eyes full of a love I'd once feared I'd lost forever. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll have you. We toasted again, not to 15 years, but to our second first anniversary, as Rebecca called it. A new beginning, forged in the crucible of crisis. What had seemed like the definitive end of our marriage had, paradoxically, become the catalyst for something far stronger, more authentic, more deeply connected than either of us could have imagined. The call that had nearly destroyed us had, in the end, called us back to each other, to a truth we'd both been avoiding. And this time we were both listening.